practice as we learn and measure and bake cookies right from within our very own kitchen. Records show that Egyptians had bread as early as 2500 BC. In 300 BC, a pastry cook was a highly respected professional in the Roman Empire. The art of baking soon became widely known throughout Europe and Asia. Then, the Industrial Revolution advanced baking as the quality of ingredients improved and automation replaced those time-consuming manual by-hand processes. So, just so we understand what the term baking is, it means that we are cooking food by dry heat in an oven. But in other parts of the world, people are using hot ashes by a fire pit or hot stones by a fireplace. So the proper key to baking is to get both the oven temperature and the baking time of the cookies equal. And that is dependent upon the size or the weight of the item that you are baking. So for cookies, it is a smaller and less dense product that takes less time to cook. So it's very important to follow the recipe for appropriate baking time so that it doesn't burn or you may not end up fully cooking. So be aware that depending on your oven's design, that it may take more or less time to bake the cookies. So be attentive while you're in the kitchen and make sure you're standing close by the cookies. While being in the kitchen, consider it a science lab where chemical reactions are taking place. So the more we understand our ingredients, how they are mixed, and how heat is added to that, the better we become at baking. Flour has a protein called gluten that gives structure and strength to the cookie. The more it gets stirred with other ingredients, the more the gluten is developed. With cookies, we would want to stir less to develop gluten because there is less ingredients, which takes less time for the gluten to develop itself. Next is sugar, and this gives sweetness and flavor, tenderness and texture, moisture for density, which is soft and not hard, and coloration, which is the brown crust of the cookie. Next, there are fats, like butter and oil, that are tenderizers. They add softness and fluffiness to the texture of the cookie. Leavenings, like baking soda, give structure, shape, and texture to the cookie. Liquids, like this vanilla extract, add moisture and are needed to develop the gluten in flour. The less liquid, the less gluten there is, and the product becomes more tender. We want less liquid for our cookies, so they remain soft and tender. And then we have eggs, which provide structure, moisture, and flavor, etc. They work like all the other ingredients, but they help to enhance all the other ingredients' purpose and flavor. Now that we understand what our ingredients do, let us now begin to measure our own cookies by following our recipe. Remember, our cookie's outcome is dependent on how we mix the ingredients together according to that recipe. So if it calls for certain ingredients to be mixed and set aside, you must follow the recipe. Because if a step is skipped or ingredients mixed that shouldn't be mixed, we could end up with very dense and coarse cookies, which ends up them being thrown out. Now, as we begin baking, there are a few things to consider and do before we start. So before preheating the oven, we have to make sure that the pans are going to be in the center of the oven so that the heat is evenly distributed. So we'll look through it and we'll see if it looks like it's right in the middle, which it is. So we're good there. So then what we're going to do is we're going to preheat the oven temperature given by the recipe. We aren't going to do that right now, but when we get to our cookies and baking them, we will do that. And then as you follow the recipe, recheck the ingredients listed. Go through it slowly to make sure that no steps are skipped. That's important. And then when it comes time to baking the cookies, never open the oven door while the cookies are in there. Use the oven light and use the window to check in to see how the cookies are baking. Now the reason why it's important to not open the oven door while you're baking is because every time this door is open while they're baking, 25 degrees is lost, and therefore that can cause a disturbance to the cookies, which can make them not rise or fall, and then they could probably end up being burnt, and so that wouldn't go according to the recipe. So we need to make sure that we are looking through the window and not opening up the door. Now for our main baking tools. What we will need are a couple of baking pans to place the cookies on, different measuring spoons, a cup and a half cup for measuring, a knife which acts as a leveler, and a couple of mixing bowls to mix our ingredients in. Before we begin, it's important to look at both the ingredients and the directions to clarify any misconceptions you have or to make sure that you have all your utensils, tools, and everything set to go before you start to bake. Before we begin to bake, the most important thing we need to do is wash our hands. Then we preheat the oven. Now we begin baking. You begin with adding 1 cup of flour. You level it out. Place it in your mixing bowl. Get another cup of flour. Level that one out as well. Add that to your mixing bowl. And then you'll add another 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Add that to your mixing bowl. And now you're done with your flour, and now you want your baking soda. And you're going to take your measuring spoons and get a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, level it out, and place it in your mixing bowl. Next comes your butter, and you're going to want 1 cup or 2 sticks of unsalted butter at room temperature. I went ahead and I melted the butter so it would be easier to stir. Next, you want 1/2 cup of granulated white sugar. Fill the cup and level it out. And then place that in your mixing bowl. Next, you want 1 cup of packed light brown sugar. And with the brown sugar, you're going to want to compact it very tightly in there. So just push it in as hard as you can. And level it out. And add that to your mixing bowl. And in our recipe, it calls for you to stop and now mix all that's in the bowl already. Before we moved on to our next step, the recipe asks us to make it light and fluffy. And now that we are there, we're going to add our salt. And we need 1 teaspoon of salt. Level it out. And place it in the mixing bowl. Sometimes we make mistakes. Once we get the lid off of the vanilla, it calls for 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. And there's 1, oops, we spilled a little bit, that's okay. And a second one. And then we can always go back and put a little bit extra in. After the vanilla, you want to put in 2 fresh large eggs. After you put all the ingredients in, you want to mix it really well until nothing is left but the dough. And our final ingredient that we need to put in is our chocolate chips. It calls for 2 cups. Here's our first cup. Put it in. And our second cup. and stick that one in. Then you're going to mix it really well. Now that we've mixed all the ingredients together, we're going to take our PAM, which is a cooking spray, spray the pans down so that the cookies, when they bake, don't stick to the pan. And now we're going to take about a spoonful and we're going to mush it together like a ball, and we're going to place it about 2 inches apart from each other. And you're going to make a row of 3 cookies in each row. Make sure they're all about the same size. Almost done. And our last one. And now we are ready to put them into the oven. So now that we have our cookies all made and on the tray, what we're going to do is we need to have oven mitts because the oven's going to be really, really hot. It's at 350 degrees for this recipe. So what we're going to do first is we're going to walk over to the oven, open it with our oven mitts, make sure you're back and away and not close up because you don't want to burn yourself. Then you're going to take your cookie tray in both hands with both oven mitts, and you're going to stick it in the middle of the oven. And then you're going to close it, and then you're going to set it for 10 minutes. And then you're going to watch your cookies, remember, with the oven light on and through the window. And never ever open up the door. And then your cookies will be ready to go in 10 minutes. And if we followed the recipe correctly, here should be the outcome of our cookie. Fluffy and light, ready to eat and enjoy.